Hey there, Discover Family Church. Hope you guys are doing great today. I want to continue talking about what it means for us to actually be a disciple of God. And yesterday we talked about how being a disciple of Jesus means that we're going to find some lepers and we're not going to be scared to touch them, to be around the people that are in need. And today it sort of branches off of that a little bit. And it's something that we see Jesus did his entire ministry, which is he was friends with sinners. And I think for most of us, I personally, I grew up in a little bit of a Christian bubble, and I'm sure some of you guys did too, but the idea of I went to a Christian high school, I was at a church all the time, my dad's a pastor, listen to Christian radio. We shopped at Christian bookstores, all that kind of stuff. We didn't eat at Christian chicken because Chick-fil-A wasn't in Illinois where I lived at the time. But we basically, I was surrounded by Christians or at least people that understood the idea of Jesus. Whether they were living for it or not, it was pretty well most people I was around at least claimed some form of Christianity. And as an adult, though, the truth is that we all know people that aren't living a walk with Jesus. They're not in a relationship with him, and we all know people that honestly probably don't claim to have a relationship with him. Whether they claim another religion, whether they another God, whether they claim to be an agnostic or an atheist, or whether they just don't claim anything. They don't care. We all know them, but the question becomes, are they just somebody that we know peripherally, or are we friends with them? Do we break bread with them? Do we spend time with them? We see over and over and over again that Jesus did that, and we can look at Matthew chapter 9, and we see that. In Matthew chapter 9, verse 10 through 13, it says, while Jesus was having dinner at Matthew's house, many tax collectors and sinners came and ate with him and his disciples. Now that coming to eat with them in their house and eat with Jesus, that was basically eating with Jesus would have been at least in that realm, would have been a privilege. It would have been an honor. And you don't just give that out to random people, but specifically Jesus wanted to eat with tax collectors who were basically, thieves and sinners. And so the next two verses are really crazy because I look at it and I see a lot of my history in the legalistic side of Christianity. Because when the Pharisees saw this, they asked his disciples, why does your teacher eat with the tax collectors and sinners? Why? Basically, the leaders of the church at the time said, why does your guy eating with thieves and sinners? And they're asking the disciples, they're not even asking Jesus, but Jesus, he's so aggravated that he speaks up and answers for them. Jesus said, it is not the healthy who needs a doctor, but the sick. For I have not come to call the righteous, but the sinners. And the truth is, church, that we need, if we want to change the world, it doesn't happen if your friends are just Christians or people that you know from church. And I'm not saying people that the only interaction you have with them is trying to get them saved. See, Jesus had moments where he was trying to get people to fall in love with him and to become followers of his. But this is a moment when he's just chilling and eating dinner. It doesn't mention anywhere that he is preaching to them or teaching them. He says he is just eating. He's having dinner with them. They're his friends. They're who he's spending time with. And if we want to change the world, then we have to be in the lives, not just peripherally, but we need to be in the lives of non-Christians, of people who don't believe. Because you're never going to be able. I always say it like this: it's like who is better to minister to a plumber? Is it Pastor Johnny, or is it the plumber's friend who goes to church and loves Jesus? The thing is that we have not just the ability, but the responsibility if we are going to be a disciple of Jesus, to be in the lives of non-Christians. In this world, but not of this world, is a term we've always heard. And I have an analogy that I've used for many years, and if you've been to church a while, you may have heard me say it, but it just rings so true here. The verse that says we're to be in the world but not of the world. And the problem is that as Christians, we have not followed that to the letter. Most Christians, by and large, do one of two things. They either fly so far above the world that they look down their noses at it, or they go so far into the world that they're corrupted by it. And the analogy I like to use is that of picture a body of water, the ocean. And for a lot of Christians that don't interact with people who aren't in a relationship with Jesus, they live their life like an airplane flying overhead. And if you're down on this, if you're in the water and you look up, you can see that airplane, but that airplane is not affecting anything that's happening in that water. It's not affecting it at all. It's just flying above, looking down on it. And so many times as Christians, we fly above the world and we look down our noses at the world, like we're better, like we aren't as broken as them, which is a massively false assumption, because we've all hated, we've all crucified Jesus, we've all done the wrong, but we act like we're better at times. And I grew up in a world like that, in a legalistic Christian world where we didn't interact with the unsaved because, they're not Christians. You can't be friends with them. You can't. But that's the exact opposite of what Jesus did. And so a lot of Christians fly above like an airplane. And then there's the other subset that they dive so far into the world they become corrupted by it. And I like to use the analogy of a submarine. That you take it so far into the world, under the water there, that you're corrupted by it. If you're on the surface of the ocean and a submarine is 100 meters below you, you would never know it. It just rolls by. It just goes on. It doesn't force any change in that world. It is fully engulfed in nothing but the world. And that's not what the Bible says. It says be in the world but not of the world. Not fly above it and not be so far in it that you're corrupted by it. I believe that God calls us to be a battleship. I don't know if you remember that Apollo 13, the scene where in the movie Tom Hanks is playing Jim Lovell and he's flying in the airplane, and how he talks about how at one point all of his instrumentation, all of his electronics, all the lights inside of the cabin of his plane died, and he didn't think he was going to make it back. And then he looked down and he saw the algae, the phosphorescent, the algae that was churned up by a battleship. And he said it was like a blanket guiding him home, that he just followed it all the way back to the battleship so he didn't have to ditch the plane out into the ocean. See, a battleship can roll through a hurricane. I mean, I'm talking about, those big battleships. They can roll through a hurricane. They can roll through anything. And the thing is that they are fully in that world, but they are not affected by it. In fact, they are the ones doing the affecting. Waves can splash against it and come against it, but it doesn't rock back and forth. It's steady. It's steady enough for a plane to land on it. And everywhere it goes, it leaves a wake of change, and it makes a difference. And I believe that's what God calls us to be. If we want to be disciples of Jesus, then we need to have friends in this world that we are affecting, not we're affected by, but that we are affecting. One of my favorite memories, and I'll finish with this, is a moment when I had posted some stuff on a blog I was doing. This was years ago, and a friend of mine who's not a Christian liked what I wrote because he understood what it meant. And he's still not a Christian, and I love him to death. He's a great guy. But he sent me one of the best messages ever. He said, "Johnny, thanks for being Christian and not just being a Christian." See, I think that's our goal today. Be Christian. Be like Christ. Don't just call yourself a Christian and fly so far above that you look down your nose. Don't just call yourself a Christian and dive so far in you're corrupted by it and everybody thinks you're a hypocrite. Be Christian. Be like Jesus. Jesus was not affected by these sinners that he was eating dinner with, but he was friends with them and he spent time with them so that he may be the doctor for their soul when they needed it. I encourage you to do that today. I love you. Have a great day. I'll talk to you soon.